Now, hear me out, Tigercast fans. Hear me out. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What's he going to come up with now? Usually, now, hear me out's followed by some rubbish theory. And sometimes you're right, but sometimes the theory has some merit. And then we've done a Now Hear Me Out Tyler Sonzi. Tonight, we're doing a Now Hear Me Out Samson Ryan. Now, this one might be a little bit of a harder sell from my perspective because of, I suppose, his history with the club. But there's some thought process and rationale behind what I'm about to pitch to you all. And look, you can tell me in the comments below if you think I'm kidding myself or not. We're all going to have various opinions on this one. I think this will divide more people than the Tyler Sonzi one, I think. So, now hear me out. Samson Ryan, I think, will make it. Now, I said think because there's still an element of doubt and there's still a lot to play out. But let's have a look at the facts and figures around this and the logic and rationale behind this, my call to say that. Because it's probably a little bit extraordinary on the surface. I can understand why there'd be some hesitation about believing what maybe could be a possibility of him turning into a real valuable player for us. But Samson Ryan is 24 years old, so still on the younger side in terms of Ruckman and a big player. As they always say, the tall players usually take longer to develop and grow. He was drafted with pick number 40 back in the 2020 draft. Now, I will go to his draft profile shortly as well, but we'll push on to the other stats in the meantime. 23 games so far, 15 goals. He's 206 centimetres. Now, 206 centimetres actually puts him in the top 17 players for height in the AFL. And there's only 11 other players ahead of him who are taller. And we actually already have two of them on our list in Matea Kalina and Oliver Hayes-Brown, both of which aren't playing AFL at the moment. And there's one or two others in that list, in that top 11, that aren't playing AFL either. So in reality, he could be in the top 7 or 8 tallest players playing AFL or have played AFL in some way, shape or form. And I know the ruck's not always about height, but by geez, it helps being tall if you're a ruckman. Compared to Nankervis, who I think he's always been undersized for a ruckman, and I don't want to diminish what Nank brings to the team because what he does around the ground and his fierceness, his competitiveness, his tackling, chasing, marking, aggression, all that stuff is worth its weight in gold, and I don't want to take away that from a second. But even when we had Ivan Soldo at the club, I and maybe a few others probably thought that players like Ryan and Soldo, for example, were actually better tap ruckman than what Nankervis is, simply because they're able to reach the ball better than what Nankervis could. We'll get on with the stats though, because this is about Samson Ryan, not about Nankervis. So in the 3 years he's been at the club, he obviously had his debut game against St Kilda in 2021, which was an absolute nightmare, and he should not have played that game. I'm happy to write that one off. That was a mulligan. 2023, 14 games, 12 goals, averaged 12 hitouts a game and had 171 hitouts total. And 2024, he only had 8 games. Now, in 2023, in June, or at around the June-July mark, he had the highest hitouts to advantage percentage in the competition, and the qualification for that was you had to have attended 150 ruck contest in 2023. So Samson Ryan was number 1 with 40.7% hitouts to advantage. And I know 14 games is, you maybe would call that a small sample size, but he was able to put it to our advantage often enough that it put him in the number 1 spot. And I think for a long time, one of the big things we've been missing in the middle is being able to have those hits to advantage. So often you see other ruckmen putting it down their midfielder's throat and bursting away from the stoppages. We don't really get that. We're kind of reliant upon Nank maybe halving the contest and our midfielders being good enough to rove that and then get it on their own terms. The problem is, though, when we're relying on that, when we have been relying on that, we've had players like Dusty, Koch, Edwards, players like that who have been in the midfield to make that work. So they're obviously in a whole other elite caliber of player who can adapt to situations and make that work for us. Now with this new crop coming through, I don't know whether it's going to work as well as we want, and that's not Nank's fault. That's just the nature of the beast, being raw young midfielders. But what I do think, I just think he's got a bit more to give, and I think he might make it. Now, in July 2024, he signed a 3-year contract extension to stay at the club till the end of 2027, where he would be 27 years of age, which is what you would probably call prime optimum age for a ruckman. Now, given he's only played he's only played 23 games in his time at the footy club so far, I guess it's no secret there's probably been a lot of frustration from supporters. We've seen him play as a forward quite a lot in the VFL, and we've seen him play predominantly forward when he's played AFL. He's kicked a few goals here and there. However, I think it's pretty obvious that he's not a forward ruck. I think that's been a makeshift thing from the club to try and just make it work, because maybe we've had some forward issues along the journey and things like that. I think his true position is the number one ruck. And I actually think the club know this and believe this as well, hence the contract extension. Because there was a lot of question marks of, well, why are we giving Samson Ryan a 3-year contract extension when he's hardly playing any games? He's not impacting, he's not doing anything. I think, and I've heard little bits and pieces, but I believe internally the club really rate him as a ruckman and believe that he is the man to take the mantelpiece off Nank when that time comes. And that time's coming sooner rather than later. So Nankervis is 30 years of age, contracted to the end of 2026. Tasmania's coming into the picture as well. Now, I won't be at all shocked if Toby Nankervis finishes his playing days at Tasmania. It would make complete sense for him and I would be completely understandable of it. I just think there's a little crossover period here where Samson Ryan is going to take the number one ruck mantle from Nankervis. And I think this is also what played a little bit of a factor in Soldo leaving as well. That Samson Ryan, I reckon they already had touted to be the main man at some point in time. The good news is from everything we've sort of seen, read and heard in the preseason so far for 2025, is he's been doing a hell of a lot more work as the ruckman in drills and match simulation and things like that, which is really pleasing. Now, I don't know what this means in terms of how many games Samson Ryan might play for us in 2025. I would like to think it's more than 8, which is what his 2024 stat was. But what's going to be interesting is if we start to play and manage Nank a little bit. Does he miss a couple of away games? If he's got niggles, we can probably rest him. But then I suppose the hard part with that is we may not be able to do that if he's captain. And this is where the captaincy thing is very interesting. I believe that if Nank does relinquish the captaincy, and that would be of his own choosing, I don't think we should be forcing him to do this. It would be if he was wishing or wanting to give it up just to focus on footy, and let's say hypothetically Tim Taranto took over. If the captaincy changes hands, I think we'll see Nank a bit more managed in 2025-26, which will allow Samson Ryan some more game time as the number one ruck. Now, size in terms of frame has been the other question mark as well. And I know the AFL don't record weights anymore, but the last recorded weight of Samson Ryan was 105 kilos. So he's definitely filled out and put on the right size that we think is relevant for a ruckman. All right, so I want to read out some of his draft profile from the Rookie Me website, and Draft Central. So remember, this is from 2020. This is what they were talking about of him back then. So he's still measuring 206 centimeters back then, but he was only 95, 96 kilos. So, having missed out on the Academy Series, he continued to hone his craft and remains a potential project player with plenty of upside as a mobile 206cm key position prospect. And he was now available in the draft because Brisbane declined to take him. Strengths: height, size, ruck work, mobility, upside, improvements, consistency / raw, and endurance. They say, while Ryan does most of the things you would expect of a 206cm player, much of the big man's value and potential is also seen through his flashes at ground level and with ball in hand, which we have seen because he is a relatively good shot for goal too, and he's quite nimble and quick below his feet, which is good. It's hard to ignore his height though, which is often a factor as he outjumps or outreaches his opponents to win big hauls or hitouts. He averaged 26 per his 5 NAB League games and managed 21 in his sole Allies outing. So he uses his size to advantage. And going down to the very bottom, so they got the draft projection. They had him projected as a rookie. And they said Ryan would be an ideal project player taken in the rookie draft, most likely by a club which has the scope to develop him over the long term behind an already dominant ruckman at senior level. That's the line that makes me the most interested, because that is exactly what has happened. We've drafted him where we already had Nankervis doing ruck duties. We also had Soldo as a backup ruck. We obviously had Naismith come in for a brief period as well. But the fact that they identified that that's the best environment for him because he must have been extremely raw. And I also believe that Samson Ryan was quite a good cricketer in his younger years. So maybe similar to a few other players who have done both sports, didn't have full exposure to AFL in a sort of a full-time way for his junior career. So maybe there's still an element of learning and development in him, which is why he's been deemed a big project player. But yeah, I just thought that line was interesting because what they said should happen has happened. And now here we are in 2025, with Samson Ryan finishing his contract in 2027. And I think the number one ruck spot is his to take if he puts in the work and does all the right things. He's got the height. He knows how to tap the ball. We just need to see him put it together. And maybe that comes through opportunity. Maybe there's more opportunity this year. I hope so, because I want to see where this goes. But I think what seems certain is the club are backing him. That contract extension is a show of support and a show of backing him to make it as the number one ruck. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Am I crazy? Am I looking too much into things? I really believe that Samson Ryan will be our number one ruckman in the coming years. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you make of all those facts and figures? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like the Richmond content, make sure you like and subscribe for more, and I'll catch you for the next one. Go Tigers.